Well, with Parliament back as well, not just the schools, at least those that are opening, tomorrow will be a big energy day. Yes, energy policy will be debated, many amendments put down. And of course, campaigners on both sides are urging MPs to act in one way or another. Well, GB News' Joe Casper went down to Parliament Square to interview Chris Packham. Now, he started off by asking him about his protest at Rishi Sunak giving new licences out for oil and gas drilling in the North Sea and the very concept of energy self-sufficiency.
Well, I've been helping to assemble a group of scientists to come here today. The scientists are the people with their fingers really firmly on the pulse of climate breakdown. They're the people with the facts. And what I want to happen is for MPs, our elected representatives and ministers, to come out of that building and listen to these people. Because the message is very clear. We need to leave fossil fuels in the ground if we are going to get through this period of climate breakdown. That's the first thing that we can do. And at the moment, we've got a government which isn't listening. It's already said that it's going to open another coal mine and also grant 100 new licences for oil and gas exploration in the North Sea. That's not a healthy way forward for you, for me, for wildlife and for the planet.
Arguably, though, Chris, that the government is listening to its voters who are being stung by energy bills, cost of living crisis, and maybe energy self-sufficiency is the way to go for this country.
So a recent poll shows us that second to the cost of living crisis, the thing that's worrying the British public most of all is climate breakdown. So it's high on the political agenda and therefore it needs to be dealt with properly. And when this government says that it's going to offer us energy security by further exploitation of North Sea oil and gas, it's lying. That's not true. For instance, if it were to grant a drilling licence for Rosebank, that Rosebank oil field is owned by the Norwegian government. They would own that oil, not the UK. We would make some tax revenue for it. And ultimately, if we invest in new oil and gas, not that that's already being pumped at the moment, it could take 20 to 30 years before that comes online. And in 20 to 30 years' time, we're not going to be using oil and gas. What this government needs to see is that it needs to make a rapid transition of investment into renewable energies. And that means retraining, investing those communities that are currently engaged in the oil and gas industries to make sure that they have a secure future economically and we all have a secure future environmentally.
Well, there's the argument put, and it's put articulately and it's put with passion. I think it's nonsense, but that is what Packham and the others believe. They genuinely think that we will not be using oil and gas in 20 or 30 years' time. I think we will be using oil and gas, maybe less of it, but we will be using it in 20 or 30 years' time, and we'll be using a hell of a lot of it for at least the next 20 years. And I'd say, Chris, if you're really worried about fossil fuel emissions, you're in the wrong city. You should be in Beijing. That's where the protest should be, because, of course, the Chinese built 80 gigantic coal-fired power stations in 2022 alone. Now, Joe Casper went on to ask him about onshore wind farms, because it would seem that Rishi Sunak's government have had a complete change of heart. It looks like MPs tomorrow will approve the building, once again, of onshore wind farms.
I am. It's investment in renewables. The thing about onshore wind is we have to be very careful where we put it. It requires public consultation, and obviously, as a wildlife lover, we need to make sure we put it in a place where it doesn't damage our wildlife. But
I'm sorry, Chris, but a wildlife lover, wind farms kill lots of thousands of birds every single year.
When wind farms were initially put up, and we're talking a long time ago now, some of them were sited in the wrong place and they damaged migratory birds. There's no question about that. I've seen it. I can't deny that. But that's because it was early days. They were in the wrong place. We have the technology. We know where the birds are, and we need to work together to make sure that we and the birds have a sustainable future. And that means we've got to invest in those renewable energies.
Well, whether Chris Packham is right about the siting of those wind farms, I just don't know. All I would say is our plans are to pretty much fill up the North Sea with vast numbers of wind turbines. And, of course, we get this massive migration, which will start next month. Ducks, geese, swans coming across from Finland, Russia, many other parts of Scandinavia. I can't comment whether Packham is right about the siting of these wind farms. What I absolutely can say is that the more reliant we are on wind energy, the more vulnerable we are to total power blackouts. Unless, of course, we have the available gas to back it up so that we can literally keep the lights on. And this show has discussed this time and time again, but we're up against people who genuinely think that renewable energy is actually going to satisfy the needs of this country when, frankly, it simply cannot do so. And finally, things that we can perhaps do at home, including this very entertaining suggestion by Chris Packham as to what we should do with the Palace of Westminster.
Well, I would say to them, speak to any landscape photographer and ask them what they think about pylons, all of those power cables which stretch and crisscross all across our country. They merge into the landscape. I lived near a system of pylons for a long time. They vanished from my day-to-day life. We soon begin to accept changes in our landscape, and this is a time where we have to change. We have to change our minds and our practices, because if we don't have a future for us or that landscape. There's no doubt about that. And when it comes to solar, what about the roof of that building? What about the roof of that building? What about the roof of the House of Commons? We could cover that with solar panels. And
you want to cover the House of Commons, Houses of Parliament, with
well,
solar
that would
panels?
be a lovely stunt, wouldn't it, really? But, I mean, speaking more sensibly, there were a lot of buildings here in London with flat roofs that could have solar on, and that would add to the energy efficiency of this city. So putting solar in the right place, putting wind in the right place would be the right thing to do. But we've got no choice but do it.
Well, there you are. Solar panels all over the Palace of Westminster. Who knows, it may well happen. And as for his We Love Pylons campaign, well, let me assure you that all the big new proposals for North Sea wind development will mean a very large number of pylons going across East Anglia, which is meeting, of course, with great local opposition. Who would want to live near those high-powered cables on the pylons? Absolutely nobody, I think sensibly, suggest. And I have to say, it's quite funny, isn't it, really, that nearly everybody in Parliament is agreed about the need for us to go rapidly towards net zero, regardless of the fact that we only produce less than 1% of the world's CO2, and that India and China and Indonesia and others are, frankly, completely and utterly ignoring it. And it isn't just the over-reliance on wind. Actually, without subsidy, these projects would never have got off the ground. And once again, wind energy is pretty marginal because of the increased cost of the turbines and everything else. The only way it'll survive is with big taxpayer-funded subsidy. Of that, I'm as near certain as I can be. But it's funny, you've got a pro-net zero Parliament, you've got campaigners outside saying go further, go quicker, and actually public opinion is saying, look, yeah, sure, we all want to live in a decent environment, but the realisation of how relatively small the UK is, how little difference, frankly, we make on the world, and the sheer cost to everybody of policies that, frankly, are mad. And I would include ULEZ in this. I mean, ULEZ is part of Khan's determination to push for net zero. And all of this simply makes the poor poorer.